Okay, so now we're going to solve some examples. And so when you're solving absolute value inequalities, you go about it the exact same way as solving equations, and the fact that you need to isolate the absolute value bars first. Don't make any decisions until it's isolated. So on number 1, there's no work we need to do to isolate because these bars are already all by themselves on the left-hand side. Once you have isolated the absolute value bars, you are ready to decide whether you want to use an and or an or, and I like to do that right here. So this is a less than, so I know I'm going to use and I know my final answer is going to be a sandwich. You can't make this decision until you've isolated the bars, because it could flip. Okay, and so after I make that note to myself, I begin solving. And so now that I know I'm using and, you take what's inside the bars and you write it twice. And then on the first case, you write it exactly as the inequality appears. On the second case, we're using the word and. You flip the inequality and you switch the sign. 2 actions. Flip it and switch it. Okay? So in the first case, you leave everything the same. On the second case, you flip it, flip, and switch. Okay, you always have to do that for your second case. Flip it and switch it. 2 action items there. Your inequalities will never be facing the same direction for your 2 cases. Once you have your 2 cases, you're ready to solve these linear inequalities. So on the left, we subtract 9, and I get n is less than or equal to -8. I'm still using and. On the right side, still subtract 9, leaving me with n is greater than or equal to -10. Okay, now I like to graph my solution. And so n is less than or equal to -8. I need to put -8 and -10 on my number line. So 0 would be here, -8, -10. -10 is more negative, so make sure you put them in the right order on your number line. Okay, and so since this says less than or equal to, I'm going to put closed circles on those points. Okay, and then less than or equal to -8 is this way. And greater than or equal to the -10 is this way. It makes a sandwich just like we said it would. Okay, and so when you write your final answer, you're going to write it as a sandwich inequality. So -10 to -8. Notice that this inequality is facing the -8. It's still facing the -8. This inequality is facing away from the -10. It's still facing away from the -10 when I write my final answer. And you do need to write it as a sandwich. Okay, for number 2, I'm not ready to make any decisions yet. I have to isolate the absolute value first. And so I need to subtract 14. So that leaves me with absolute value of -7x greater than or equal to 14. Okay, now we are ready to make our decision. And so this right here is a greater. And so I'm going to use the word or, and I'm going to have 2 intervals for my answer. Okay, and so now when I write my cases, -7x is greater than or equal to 14 for case number 1, or -7x, flip it, switch it. Keep it the same. Flip it, switch it. for this negative 7x. Okay, now we are ready to isolate x, so divide by negative 7. And then anytime, this is an Algebra 1 principle, anytime you divide by a negative number, your inequality flips. So lots of flipping and switching, you got to keep track of all of that. And so x is less than or equal to negative 2 now. We have to flip it because we divided by this negative. Okay, over here, we divide by the negative 7. This inequality also flips. Negative 14 divided by negative 7 is positive 2. Okay, and so let's jump down to our number line. We have a negative 2 and a 2 we need to graph. We have the equal to, so we need closed circles. And then this left one says less than or equal to. This right side says greater than or equal to. 2 intervals, just like we said it would be. And so our final answer, we have to write 2 separate answers separated by an or. And it's customary to write it in numerical order. And so put the negative 2 before the 2 separated by the or. And remember, your final answer will never have 2 inequalities facing the same direction. Except for when you come to write your sandwich, they're always going to be facing to the right in your sandwich. But notice here, they are facing different directions, It's a good way to know you did something wrong. If you end up with 2 inequalities, like with an or, and they're facing the same direction. Okay, erase that. Number 3, the absolute value is already isolated. So we are ready to decide. This is a great tour. And so if you want, you can already put open circles because there's no line. And you can already do your shading because you know it's going to end up looking like that. Okay, so to write our cases, we have 8 minus 6m is greater than 32, or 8 minus 6m, flip it, switch it. Notice I'm not writing any bars in these cases. You don't want to keep the bars on. All right, first step, subtract your 8. 32 minus 8, 24. We're dividing by a negative, so m flip. M is less than negative 4. Flips again. Negative 40 divided by 6 is a positive 20 over 3. Okay, simplify fractions as much as possible. You can use decimals as well. And so on my number line, the negative 4 would go here. The positive 20 over 3 would go here. This says greater than, and I did shade greater than. This says less than, and I have less than shaded. And so again, this is separated by an or, and so my final solution looks like that. Okay, I'm going to stop the video. Go ahead and try 4, 5, and 6 on your own, and then I will come back in another video to walk you through those.